everybody. Welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com. Happy Wednesday morning and welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Podcast. I'm Erik, here with AJ in Austin, Texas, and this is episode 162.
Yeah, man. I don't know why I was just thinking about this. Like we intro into the show and usually give people an update about what we're doing, and I was thinking about trivia. So for anyone out there that's done bar trivia, Erik, Janelle, George, and I, we did some bar trivia at a pretty competitive place.
Yes.
Wow, I was very surprised. I thought we had a decent performance, and we just edged our way into the better half of teams. I think there's 17 teams, and we finished in 8th place.
8th place.
Oh man, but yeah, that's Austin life.
There were a couple of sort of travel-related type of questions in there, but for the most part, I feel like having any knowledge of like international geography or anything just pretty much didn't factor in. It was mostly like songs that I didn't know. And
yeah, well, the part that killed us was the visual one where they show you the faces of those TV characters, and we only got like 3 out of 8 of them. It was like Carlton from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Alex from Modern Family, and then George got some British one or something. But yeah, man, it's a very Austin-y thing. A lot of fun, unique bars doing fun things. I know trivia is kind of a national thing now, but it was a good time. And the guy that was running trivia was kind of a part-time stand-up comic. He was not shy to take some political cheap shots too.
Yeah, so we had a pretty awesome week last week, I think, overall. We've got some pretty cool stuff to share this week. So today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about our upcoming travel plans. AJ is departing next week for Brazil, so I want to talk with you a little bit about that redemption.
A little bit more than a week, but yeah, a week and a half. The 23rd. A week from the show. So yeah.
Okay, so it's creeping up, man.
Yeah,
it's coming fast. I also made a hotel redemption for the first time in a long time, so I want to talk a little bit about that because we get tons of questions. In fact, I was talking with a Abroaders person today. I had a little consultation phone call set up, and he was asking about kind of the trade-off between airline miles and hotels. And just my most recent experience kind of made me rethink the answer to that. I think the general answer is still correct, but we're going to dive into that in a second.
Yeah. And then flights, like we haven't really gotten it. You mentioned a little bit about your stuff last week with United and saving your ass on paying a bunch of taxes and fees because it would have been really expensive in Singapore. And something I haven't shared that could be of value is my flight from Sao Paulo to Fortaleza that I was about to have to pay just an obnoxiously high price, but Delta Sky Miles saved me again. Wouldn't have thought I'd said that on the same trip to Brazil twice. But
yeah, well, so let's start with that because a big reason that my redemption. So I did that this past weekend. I booked my trip from Austin to Rio, and I had a much harder time than you did because I waited too long.
Yeah.
And lots of people ask about when do you want to actually start looking for tickets. Unfortunately, there's no good answer except as soon as you know your trip.
And I will say one thing with Delta. This is just anecdotal. This is my experience over the past year, but I've kept some pretty strong tabs just because if you have a good chance to use miles with Delta, you do it because their availability is just not as plentiful. And I've seen a really strong trend with Delta that it doesn't really open up. It only closes down. It's a one-way street. You're like 2 months out. There's a lot of 30,000 point flights to Europe and South America. Yeah. You get 1 month out, that they extend.
It does seem to be the trend. I mean, so when I was looking at Delta, and mind you, now you're flying to Sao Paulo, and my goal was to fly to Rio, but Sao Paulo is a pretty easy connection there.
Yeah.
And the cheapest thing that I could find was about 50,000 points with Delta. So that was just off the charts, too expensive. Now, American, Delta, and United all have saver pricing one way from the U.S. to South America at 30,000 points. So that's what you're looking for. You found that relatively easily a few weeks ago.
And there was a handful of options. I had my pick of a few flights on the day I wanted, and had the day I wanted not been available, a couple days before and a few days after, there was 30,000 miles, $5.60.
All right, so you get to Sao Paulo, but your plans actually involve heading all the way, like halfway back up north.
Yeah,
to Fortaleza.
way north. Yeah, so good to go to the beaches north of Fortaleza. And I was in a jam there, and I was thinking, it's Carnival, so things would probably be expensive. But Fortaleza is not a big Carnival destination. Like the influx of Brazil, people are channeling into Rio, people are channeling into Salvador, and then it's kind of spread out amongst the rest of the country. And so I figured, I can probably get a flight up there for $150, $100 or something like that. Not the case. They were about $400 a person, and I was getting our flights up there, and she was going to get our flights back. So I'm like, gosh, shit, this could be a pretty expensive flight. And then I did, the typical playbook of, okay, British Airways, let's see if they've got anything that we could
because they're partners with TAM.
Exactly,
So
which is
lots of Brazil
huge network in Brazil there. Nothing doing. And then Delta was kind of a stab in the dark. I knew it'd be 12. Would probably be 12.5. And at that point, that's typically not a good redemption. Paying $25,000 for two people one way or one person round trip. But when you consider that it was 25,000 Delta Sky Miles and really low taxes and fees, or $800, I'm taking the 25,000 Sky Miles all day.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing that we were talking about before the show, and I actually just booked a redemption with GOL as well. So Delta's big partner in Brazil is GOL, GOL, and they're also partners with Air France. And Delta and Air France both charge $12.5 within Brazil. So there's not really much winning to do there unless the flight's really expensive. Right. It makes the British Airways chart. That's why you always start with British Airways. It's like $4,500 for a lot of destinations, $7,500 for others. However, I discovered recently that Etihad, which is a transfer partner of Citi, thank you, has really good distance-based pricing that's kind of similar to the British Airways chart. And so the flight for you to Fortaleza could potentially have been about 6,000 points had you been able to use Etihad. But one, Etihad takes a couple of days to transfer. Right. And two, they don't have the same availability. It's close. Like most of the time, if it's open to Delta, it's probably open to Etihad. But I learned the hard way with a fucking 40-minute phone call that it wasn't. It's not. Oh man,
another thing to mention is the paid flights I looked at were way more expensive than advertised. So I first hopped on to Kayak and Google Flights and Skyscanner, and I saw some encouraging results. Okay, this isn't too bad. And when I went to buy it, just right then, it was like $399 per person. And then I'm like, okay, check out awards. And there's only two awards left on Delta. And I went to book the award, and then it said that there was no longer available. So somebody else must have not been able to pull the trigger. And then right back when they opened up, just like a shark smelling blood in the water, just annihilated that redemption.
Wrapped those up. All right, so we're both all set for our trip to Brazil, and I wanted to cover this hotel situation because, so there's sort of two different things going on. Number one, in general, as kind of advice about the difference between hotel cards and airline cards, most of the time you can save much more by focusing your points towards flights and paying for the hotels. And so unless you just have way more points or way more earning capacity than you're ever going to use in airfare, you probably want to focus on that. Yeah. But I was looking at my trip to Cape Town and found probably my first significant good hotel redemption. So in the past, you and I have dabbled, let's say, with hotels. We've stayed at a couple of Aloft properties. Pretty much exclusively, we've done very low tier redemptions with hotels.
A couple thousand points.
In the couple thousand point range. The Aloft in Bangkok was a great example. It's an SPG property, and it costs 2,000 on weekdays and 3,000 points on weekends. So you can get a really significant stay, and that's a great deal. But with my Cape Town trip, I finally found a really good hotel redemption. I was excited about it. So I wanted to get into some of the rules here that made this possible. So this is a Marriott property in Cape Town. And the nice thing is, we talked about this a little bit before, that Starwood Preferred Guest and Marriott, they've done a really nice job with their merger where there's reciprocal benefits.
Clean.
Yep, very clean. And you can transfer points in both directions right now, which is super valuable. So for context, we started with about 18,500 SPG points. And I found, so Marriott has a 5th night free, just like Starwood does. And so if you stay 4 nights, you pay 4 nights worth of points and you get the 5th night for 0 points. So I realized that there's potentially a really good deal with this hotel. It's downtown Cape Town. It's about $220 a night. in paid value for just buying the room. And so for 60,000 Marriott points, or 4 nights worth of 15K, I was able to get 5 nights of total stay.
That's great.
Now, with the SPG transfer being 3 times, it meant that our 18.5 thousand SPG points could generate almost the 60,000 that I needed with Marriott. So that right there was just really powerful. And the piece that I needed to put it together is that Amex is a partner, an instant partner with Starwood Preferred Guests. Now, the ratio is terrible. It's 1 to 3. So it takes 3 Amex points to create 1 Starwood point.
Yeah.
But for a really small number of points that I had to make up, I needed 1,500. And so I was able to transfer 5,000 Amex points over to Starwood. That generated 1,600 and something, which got me up to 20. And then I transferred over all 20,000 Starwood to Marriott.
Man, that's a great redemption. That's the type of redemption you'd be very pleased with for a flight.
Yeah.
And in the past, we'd say, keep the flights, hotels, there's not as much money, or not the savings. And, something that just dawned on me is I think we've got a little bit of a warped view of the hotel world, because a lot of people, when they travel, they stay in a place for like 3 to 5 nights.
Right.
Where we typically are staying in
like 3 to 5 weeks.
looking for a few weeks or even a couple months on Airbnb or something, where like staying in a hotel for 2 months is just absurd unless you're like in Southeast Asia where it's just really cheap.
Yep.
But typically that doesn't play. So
yeah, the other thing that before we move on from this that I was really excited about is now I knew that the benefits were reciprocal, but as soon as I linked my Marriott account to my SPG account to make that transfer, I got an instant upgrade to Marriott Gold status. It was just like a really easy, like as soon as they linked, it told me, congratulations, you have gold. I went and looked it up, and Marriott Gold is actually pretty nice. So on top of getting a great deal on the room, I get, if there's an available upgrade, I get a upgrade on availability, and I get 4 p.m. checkout, which is really nice because we're going to be in there for a couple extra days in Cape Town. So at the very least, we've got until 4 p.m. the day we have to check out. So that's really nice. So if you haven't yet done so, there's no downside to linking your Marriott and Starwood accounts. If you have the Platinum card from American Express, you've got Starwood Gold, which gives you Marriott Gold. So a couple of things that were really nice and just worked out for a really solid hotel redemption.
Yeah. Hey, well, let me bring you down to earth here, which actually this isn't all bad, but let's cover your IHG free night snafu. So this would have been, was it 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, and a couple years ago?
So yeah, we were in Bangkok together, and we were staying at that Aloft with a 2,000 point redemption. And I got this promo from IHG that I was really excited about. That was like, if you have 2 separate stays at an IHG property, you get a free night at any property. Super straightforward. And so it was so nice, I actually did it twice. I did once with my IHG account and once with my girlfriend's IHG. We used the first one. So just to defend the value here, we used the first one for like a $700 one night stay at the Intercontinental in Hong Kong.
That's solid.
Awesome. The second one apparently expired in December, and I didn't notice. And so, it's just like, it's one of those things where even if you've spent a lot of time, like we obviously do with points and miles, it's easy to let that kind of thing slip.
Yeah.
And so I did manage to call. I asked, to talk to a supervisor, spent maybe 15 minutes on the phone, begged to get my free night back, not happening, but she did give me 5,000 bonus points.
That's nice.
A little bit of a softened blow there. And, frankly, I don't know if I had a stay that I would have been able to put together by December, but you want to keep track of those.
Yeah.
And so it's really important. If you do earn a free night, it's super easy to just think it's there for when you need it and forget that those things always have a way of expiring. Yeah.
Here's a hypothetical for you on that. If you call up the agent and, say, hello, Mr. Parkett, how can I help you? Oh, I had this free night thing and it expired in December. What do you say? Can you maybe give that to me? What would your response have been if they said, well, I'm looking at your record here and you used your free night for a hotel in Hong Kong that retails at over $700 a night. I think you've got enough value, sir.
Actually, she did kind of say like, yeah, you used that one in Hong Kong. I was like, oh, must be my other account, my wife's account, my girlfriend's account. So, that they definitely, but I did have to go to a supervisor to get any review of it.
Well,
so
good for you for
it might be worth doing if you have any point expiration or lost free nights with IHG. It is true, apparently, that the supervisors might actually do something to help. Even, it's not the full deal, but that's still worth what's a points break. That's 5,000. There's some hotels that are as low as 5K a night. Yeah. And at the very least, extends my expiration date on those points, which I'm going to keep a very close eye on. All right, so that's enough about our travel stuff. Let's get into some news and updates here.
First up, we got a promo with a new Amex offer that is definitely worth taking a look at.
Yeah, this is a really narrow but really lucrative offer for the right person. So check your Amex offers. You may get the offer of spending $1,000 or more with Air France and get 20,000 Amex membership rewards. So, I mean, I guess here the overlap you're looking for is, are you going to buy a flight that Air France would be, operating? And would this flight happen to be $1,000 or more? And before when Erik and I were kind of talking about the show, I mean, the math is those 20,000 points are worth about $400. So
yeah, worst case scenario, I mean, easily you could get $400.
So this is a situation, if you were going to buy a flight, it could make some sense to overpay a little bit to be on Air France if all the other things were equal and, there weren't deal breakers on layovers or,
One really important thing with this is what triggers the 20K points. First of all, you have to activate the Amex offer. So make sure you do that. It's targeted, but it seems very broad. We're targeted on like 3 different cards that we have. So it's pretty safe to say most people have this offer, but you need to book through Air France. So step 1, activate the offer on the card you're going to use. Step 2, make sure you book through Air France. So you can't book this through like Orbitz or Expedia. Right. It's for Air France travel booked through Air France. But if that's a possibility, you're basically looking at like enough points almost for a free one-way. Mm-hmm. So it's a pretty significant deal. So take a look at that if you're thinking about possibly buying a ticket to Europe that could be an Air France ticket. So next up, I wanted to cover a couple of credit card benefit things. This would apply to Priority Pass. So that's for people, Amex Platinum. It applies to the Sapphire and the City Prestige. Yeah. And this is great news because they have horrible availability for lounges in the U.S. for the most part. So the first one is that they've announced a airline lounge at IAD, so Washington Dulles. Yeah. And that's going to be the Turkish lounge, which is nice. I mean,
supposedly it's was reading up on 1 Mile at a Time, and he had really good things to say. I think he's pretty good at judging the lounges. He's pretty good at that, and the pictures look nice. And then the other one that is kind of interesting. It's an unusual lounge situation. It's in at London's other airport, Gatwick. And so what you get is there's like some kind of cool cafe. It's supposed to be a nice place or whatever. They do food and drinks, and it's not really a lounge, but you get a food and drink credit. So it's in pounds, so depending on the exchange rate, but it's about $20. Okay. So with your Priority Pass, you get to go into this cafe, and alcohol, non-alcohol, food, everything. You just get $20. So like it's not quite the complete feast you can get at like all you can drink lounge, but it's like pretty nice if you happen to be in London. Yep. You can go get something to eat, grab a drink, and because man, airport food is expensive, man. Yep. You get garbage food for a lot of money, so that's pretty nice.
Well, good to see another Priority Pass in the U.S. I hope they keep expanding that, and with that, I guess the one final takeaway is remember that there's no fee for guests if you have the Priority Pass through the Sapphire Reserve. So unlike the Amex Platinum card where you got to pay $35 or $27 per guest, free guests with the Reserve
one
card.
Final thing to add with the London kind of cafe situation where they give you like a food credit is I don't think it was confirmed, but there is a slight possibility that you could, I think, maybe re-enter. You get $20 per like visit, and I think it's in the spirit of it that But if you have a really long layover, I'm sure you could double dip and go grab another sandwich or cocktail or something.
All right, so we got the link to that and any black hat strategies in the show notes here. Again, abroaders.com/162. Let's move on. I want to just mention this Sapphire preferred downgrade situation because I thought this was kind of useful. Lots of people signed up for the Sapphire Reserve, which puts them, just like me, in kind of an awkward position at some point this year where I've got two
annual fees hanging over your head
a little bit. The Sapphire preferred annual fee is $95. Now, I consider the Sapphire Reserve annual fee to be $150. Yeah. And the reason for that is that you get $300 towards travel. That's as good as cash to me because I easily, no problem spend that. So the real trade-off is $55. And so it makes a lot of sense to downgrade the Sapphire Preferred to a no-fee card, if at all possible. Now, the ideal no-fee card...
Let me stop you there real quick, though, because what you're saying is you're going to pay $55 more. So you're valuing the Reserve card at well above $55 over the Preferred.
And that's the Priority Pass Club membership. That's the
bonus
the 3x
categories
on travel and restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, basically if you're going to spend a few $1,000s a year on the category of travel and restaurants, you've easily paid for the
Sure.
fee.
Yeah.
And I think that the insurance is really good on that card. Not that it isn't good on the Sapphire Preferred, but it's an easy choice to keep the more premium card, in this case, for an extra $55. So I want to offload that $95 fee for the Sapphire Preferred. Now, ideally, you don't want to close the card to avoid the fee, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's going to reduce your credit, and it's also going to cut your average age of account. So ideally, you want to just convert it into a friendly little no-fee card that you can have for as long as you want. But what we learned recently is that you can't convert it to the Freedom Unlimited, which would be my first choice. And the reason for that is, number one, Freedom Unlimited gets 1.5 on all purchases. So no categories, no paying attention to what you're buying, everything, 1.5 cents per point. That's the best earning Sapphire. That's the best earning card for Chase Ultimate Rewards outside of bonus categories. So if I had that combo, I'd basically use my Sapphire Reserve for travel and dining, and anything that, I thought I was going to need, like a hefty insurance policy, because they've got really good credit card benefits, so travel stuff.
Yeah.
But besides that, I'd use the Freedom Unlimited. And so what we found out is that you can downgrade the Sapphire Preferred to the Sapphire Regular, which has no annual fee.
Yeah.
And then you can change the Sapphire Regular over to the Freedom Unlimited. And that's a hat tip to
Greg.
frequent miler, Greg, who's a Michigan native. And,
he is. I think he's a Metro Detroit guy.
So it's a little extra work. You need to make 2 product changes. But if you really care about getting 1.5 cents per point, which can be useful, especially if you use a lot of Chase points, I think that's a really good trick to know. So just downgrade the Sapphire Preferred to a Sapphire card. That way you've got no annual fee, and then a few days later you can.
Yeah, and if anyone was curious, it does not count towards Chase's 524 stuff.
Yeah, converting a card is not the same as opening a new one. Okay, so that's a pretty useful tip. Next up, do you want to talk about the Cathay Pacific adventure that we had recently? A little learning. Yeah,
so this was interesting. I'm ashamed to admit that I didn't realize the opportunities that Cathay provided with their frequent flyer program. So the reason that we're mentioning this is they just released a credit card, and this is kind of an unusual play from the major airlines. Typically, Delta and Amex, you got American Airlines and Citi, and now Barclay, and you got United and Chase. So Cathay is releasing a credit card with a 25,000 point bonus after you spend $2,500, and it's Synchrony Bank, which they're a niche bank that specializes in rewards cards for, I forget off the top of my head, but it's like a Gap card, the Home Depot card, right. A Best, those types of
cards
things
that you don't want to get, because
typically you don't want to get. And so by the virtue of them offering this 25,000 points, we're thinking, hey man, people maybe 524s in their way, and this could potentially be a good card.
Yep.
So Erik does a little bit of a deep dive, and there's some really big opportunities, especially with round trip business class, because they've got a really attractive distance-based chart that's a little bit different than some other distance-based charts.
Okay, so to reset here, so don't pay too much attention to this. Number one, in terms of the sign up for the credit card, this is only one to go for if you've already kind of maxed out most of the other cards that are available. So take care of getting your Chase cards. Make sure you use your 524 well. This is not like one of your first 10 cards to get. But if you happen to have a use for the travel that we're going to talk about in just a second with Cathay Pacific, this can be a great way to top up your Cathay balance. And so the Asia Miles program, we're going to talk about the sweet spot here in just a second. But keep in mind that they are transfer partners 1-to-1 with Citi Thank You. So the real message here is anybody that's got a bunch of Citi Thank You points, tune in for the next 5 minutes or so, because we learned a lot about the Cathay program, and there's some great deals for business and first class travel, especially relatively long distance and round trip. So bottom line with this card, not a great offer overall, but it's $2,500 spend in 90 days for 25K extra points. So if you happen to hear what we're talking about with these kind of crazy Cathay itineraries and you're a little bit short, your thank you rewards isn't quite going to cut it, you might be able to top up with this new Synchrony Bank card.
And one thing to keep in mind also is that pretty high taxes and fees. So you're going to want to be looking at partners if you end up going forward with this. But yeah, man, let's pull up some of these itineraries, because some of these, it's almost reminiscent of the good old days with United and the round the world trip for like reasonable prices in business class.
It is reminiscent. So credit where credit is due. A lot of this we've linked in the show notes to an article by Travel is Free. This is Drew, and he just did an awesome job of breaking this down. So we're going to kind of go high level and just give you an idea of what's available, but he goes way more in detail. Yeah. So thanks a ton to Drew. This is just a super cool post, and I learned a lot. But yeah, let's get to it. So basically, you've got a situation where Cathay Pacific is outperforming the major U.S. programs. So think about American Airlines, United, and Delta in business class round trips to a ton of locations. And so if you think about it like, from the U.S. to Europe, so let's say Chicago to Rome, with Cathay, it's 80,000 round trip in business. And again, they use a distance-based chart. So Chicago to Rome might be different than a different airport, LA to, someplace further east in Europe. But the main idea is that generally speaking, it's going to beat out the zone-based charts at the business and first class levels. And so you've got if you take the opposite direction going to Bangkok via Hong Kong, let's say, with Cathay, you're looking at like 135,000 points round trip in business class, and AA is 140, so not that big a difference, but United and Delta are 160 each. And the difference is, it continues to get even bigger with first class. So there's definitely a place here for using Cathay Pacific's award chart to get a better round trip deal on some of these premium cabin tickets. And I think so if you're interested, if you have a lot of city thank you, I highly recommend just taking a look at the post, because it's got more detail. But the other key takeaway about how Cathay's program works, they do have different charts, slightly different charts, depending on how many different airlines you use. So in other words, it's different if you use all One World versus Cathay and a One World and a partner. You got to just kind of look and see what the prices are. But the main idea is that for the most part, you can get somewhere between 2 and 5 stopovers on a round trip. So this is where this expands massively in terms of value. Yeah. So in other words, I was saying a second ago, okay, it's not a huge difference. Round trip to Asia on Delta is 160 and round trip on Cathay is 135. Okay, it's 25,000 points. But wait, you get to actually stop 5 times. And by the way, they don't have any traditional zone rules. So it might not be a round trip to Asia. It could in fact be Hong Kong to Australia to Los Angeles to Tel Aviv to Doha and back to Hong Kong. That's still one round trip as far as Cathay is concerned. So you can just throw away all the damn routing rules and just add up the distance. And so in other words, some of these sort of higher priced comparisons actually could include 4 or 5 separate one-ways in business class for the price of a round trip or even less. Yeah, man, I'm looking at the one right now that's Miami, Rio, Madrid, Johannesburg, Hong Kong, Sydney, LA. And it's, I think they got it here as 190,000 points in business class. That is remarkable. So you're looking there, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 one-way long-haul segments, right? That's huge. That's essentially 3. I mean, think about what that would cost in another program that's going to break that up and that's going to make it multiple awards. 500,000 half a million miles. Yeah. So anyways, this is a pretty cool deal. Cathay does have some sort of quirks as far as, I think the biggest drawback here to be aware of is fuel surcharges. So they do charge them. If the airline levies them, it's going to be a factor for you. So ideally, you want to try and use airlines that are low or non-fuel surcharge. So like American's really good with the exception of Europe. So if you can, even though they don't have the nicest business class product per se, you can potentially save a bunch of cash by using American on flights to South America or on flights to Asia versus using one of the other airlines. So you want to kind of take a look at the taxes and fees and see how those are going to be assessed. But either way, this could be, it's worth it to me, to spend $600 on it if you're doing around the world kind of thing. And if you're doing it proper and you got a chance to try some of the elite airlines, Cathay's great in their own right. And then, Qatar, that's kind of shocking. Yeah, it was definitely fun to read through this. Maybe we'll come back if we have questions or more requests for info. But for now, we're just going to link to Drew's excellent work. By the way, free. Speaking of Drew,
I feel like he's one of the underappreciated points guys. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of Facebook advertisements and videos and download my PDF and a lot of that action. And he isn't really one of those guys.
He's my favorite follow as far as RSS goes. I mean, we probably read through about 200 articles to prep for the podcast. It's not just AJ and I. Janelle helps with this. We got people on the team that are like combing for information. Right. But whenever there's a new post on Travel is Free, I always just sit down and read it because he posts like maybe a couple times a month.
And there's no fluff pieces. There's no this top 10 list that wasn't even thought out and is inaccurate, but I wanted to publish content today. He doesn't do that.
There's none of that crap. All right. So anyways, love to hear feedback, or if any of you guys have experience booking with Cathay Pacific, if there's anything we missed. This is somewhat new to us. We've done a couple of award tickets, but that's actually, Janelle knows way more about it than me.
Yeah, she does.
Anyways, I hope you guys got some value out of that, and do let us know if you have any interesting adventures booking with Cathay Asia Miles. Speaking of listener feedback, I wanted to get to a couple on today's show. So let's see here. We've got one that's sort of a correction and just kind of a nice piece of information that I wasn't aware of. So David wrote in, we talked a little while back about the Uber and Starwood preferred guests, and he wrote us, number one, to let us know, I think we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, that they had devalued that a little bit. So you actually don't get quite as many Uber points, or you don't get quite as many SPG points. But he wanted to warn everybody that if you book your Starwood preferred guest stay through the Ultimate Rewards portal, so through Chase's website, it's not going to count for the Uber promotion. Yes. So Dave, thank you for sharing that. Basically, if you are booking an SPG stay with the intention of, hey, I travel all year on Uber, I want to rack up some extra points, just be aware you need to book through the Starwood website and not using any portal like Expedia or Chase or anything like that, or it may not count. So much appreciated, Dave, for sharing that feedback.
Yeah. Next thing, a listener. So we got a listener question, but we also, Recon Scott, I believe you're in Dallas. If you're listening, thank you for this. First of all, before we get into his question, he provided just a really great example of how doing a little bit of investigating or having a feel for the programs can radically change the price of a flight. So he was pricing out flights from Dallas to Hawaii, I believe Honolulu, and he's got Amex points. And so he found 4 options for identical Delta flights. So these are the exact same plane that other people could be on. So we got anywhere from 86,000 points down to 25,000 points. So Amex, book it through Amex Travels on the high end. Korea Air was on the low end at 25K. Delta was on the higher half, 45K, and then Air France 30. So Recon Scott, good investigating, good feel for the programs there, because man, that's just something, if you got your Amex points and you're the consultant and you just think, I just booked through Amex Travel, you just paid,
easily paying double or more in some cases. Well, so I think it's worth even sharing that, just because we get some questions that are beginner questions and we get some questions that are a lot more in depth. And I thought this was a good one because I think there's some relevant stuff from Scott's question that he posed that hopefully will help some other people. So the new trip that he's working on, let's suppose he's got 100,000 Amex and 100,000 American, and he's looking to book a trip for 2 people to Montego Bay, Jamaica. Yep. And so he's looking for a couple of nights, 4 to 5 nights in the first half of June. And so what he found is that he's able to find an itinerary that goes from home from Dallas to Miami to Montego Bay, but the layover in Miami is really crappy. It's 24 hours or just a really nasty layover. And this happens all the time. So I wanted to bring this up because the answer is not super straightforward. Sometimes the answer is just you might not be able to book a good trip if you have restricted dates. If it's got to be the first half of June and you're only looking at it now, maybe not. But I do want to go through the process because there are some ways to get away with a win here.
Yeah, so the things that Recon Scott, if I were you, the things that I would look into is the One World route map and look at other options to get into Montego Bay from. So, for example, we got flights from Dallas, which I'm guessing you looked at and there was nothing there, but then you got Charlotte, Chicago, Philadelphia, Miami, Boston, and LA. And so what you could possibly do is you could see if, let's say there's availability from, I don't know, Philadelphia, then you could look at a paid flight. And if you could get a cheap paid flight to Philadelphia, now you're connecting the dots and then redeem on British Airways from Philadelphia to Montego Bay if there's availability. You're going to be out 10,000 British Airways Avios. Let's say you bought a flight for $95 and then, things work out okay.
Yeah. So I guess step one is like the One World route map's really nice because you can search for direct routes, right? So unlike the Star Alliance one that makes you look at all the damn routes, you can actually see the direct ones with no connections. And so if you start with Montego Bay, there's only 7 airports in the US that they fly direct. And so that's going to be available sometimes with AA. Now, he looked at Miami, and I thought Miami was interesting because Miami's kind of like the bane of my existence because it does connect to a lot of places in Latin America, and I always want to do that. But the first thing I was going to say to him is, hey, check out Southwest. Hey, check out JetBlue.
Contraire, Montfair, because
they don't fly there.
Yeah, Fort Lauderdale.
So you're basically looking at like a 40-minute airport connection if you want to do that. So I guess, what you can say is like from Dallas, number one, it might be possible, on the return trip, maybe you find the direct from Montego back to Dallas. That's a great way to use 15,000 American miles to get that direct flight. But if it's not open, the point that you brought up with using BA from the other places in North America is that let's say you find, okay, there's a Charlotte to Montego Bay that's available. Now, Charlotte geographically is not that bad of a connection. Dallas, Charlotte to Montego Bay, it's a little bit out of the way, but it's pretty good. But you could either pay, if you start at Charlotte and use American miles, you're going to pay $15,000 no matter what. Same as if you're flying from Seattle, right? And so with British Airways, if it's direct, you can pay 10,000 points instead of 15. So you can save a little bit there. And since he's got Amex, he's going to actually pay 12.5, but it's still a little bit of a win. So you might consider British Airways as the way to book the award ticket if you know that the One World space is open. And the second piece is the advantage with Charlotte is that Southwest does fly from Dallas. They fly from Love Airport, but they do fly from Dallas to Charlotte, and they fly to Philadelphia direct. So if you can find one of those, I happened to see the beginning of June, there were some flights that were in the like 6,000 point range on Southwest. So ultimately, you could get a pretty good deal and potentially cut that connection down big time. So number one, find the direct flight from Montego Bay to whatever airport in the US. Number two, figure out what time that flight's departing. Give yourself a 2-hour window and see if you can find any paid flights that get you from home, in this case Dallas, to the connecting airport. I'd say like 50-50 chance you're probably going to book this cash or just
and that's another thing to keep in mind, Recon Scott. I mean, you're sending us stuff about advanced itineraries to Hawaii. It seems like you're probably going to do some traveling. So, I mean, just the thing it's sometimes easy to forget is, will I have good use of these miles in the future? Can today I buy a reasonably priced cash ticket? A year from now, I will have saved money, had better itineraries, less headaches. So if you're sitting on 100,000 Amex points and 100,000 AA points or something in the neighborhood, you can put those to use if, as opposed to forcing a bad redemption that's a long connection or a layover. So
yeah, I always find that when I've done that before, for sure, and like, oh, this won't be that bad. I'll, get a book. Or
it's always worse.
It's always a lot crappier on travel day when you remember.
And then the final point on that is like we've been running a pretty tight budget personally, so it's easy to forget that for some people buying a $750 flight is no big deal to save miles for a later day, where we're a little bit more miles rich, cash poor. Most people out there are probably a little bit more cash rich, miles poor. So
yeah, definitely good point to take forward there. Okay, so last listener feedback. This one came from Hugh. This is just a success story, and I wanted to share it because I think a lot of people are concerned about this. So he was worried a little bit about applying for another credit card, concerned that it might knock down his credit score, and he had some property refinance stuff coming up. And that's generally a good instinct to have, especially if you have a relatively young credit history. The hard inquiry will potentially leave an impact for a few months. But his particular scenario was just really good to see. He was able to actually see his score go up from about 780 to about 815. And that was because he got a big line of credit when he opened his Sapphire Reserve. And so you just got to remember that utilization is potentially a lot more impactful than the inquiry or shortening your average age of account. So Hugh, thanks for sharing the story. Great to hear that your credit went in the right direction.
And by the way, he says he's on pace to get his 100K points. So good on you for that. And looks like he is scheduling a trip to Asia as soon as he can get a firm commitment from his partner. So put the hard sell on, get that trip to Asia booked, man. Use those hard-earned miles.
Those dates, and definitely reach out if you have questions about booking that trip. Would be happy to either take a look at it for a question on the show or just get back to you one-on-one, see if we can help you get that booked.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are getting down to the end here. We got some quick links, just a couple things that might be useful to some of you guys. First up is a bonus that is going to be ending on March 8th. So you got a little bit more time. This is a British Airways transfer bonus from hotels. Probably not worthwhile unless you have a bunch of Starwood preferred guests or other hotel points that you just don't want to use for other stuff. But anyways, not a good deal with the small exception of SPG. If you got a ton of them, it could be good for strategic British Airways. And you've got till March 8th to do that. But yeah, 20,000 SPG could become 33,000, almost 34,000 British Airways. So if you use British Airways, you've got a pretty good feel for the value. Could be worth it. We'll put a link to that transfer bonus in the show notes. Next up, we've got triple miles from Delta for Airbnb stays.
Man, this is great.
I just messed this one up 2 days ago.
Oh man, even the best miss the opportunity. Man, there's just so much stuff going on, But so what we got here is you got to book by April 30th, but you're going to earn 3x Delta Sky Miles. And another thing to note is you must go through the Delta web portal and enter your Sky Miles number. Yep, so you got to have a Sky Miles account, and you got to go through. It's deltaairbnb.com. We'll link in the show notes, but don't miss that Monday morning detail.
Yeah. So I don't think there's a minimum on that. So mine wasn't huge. It was like a $150 or $200 Airbnb, but always nice to get those extra points if it's just a quick stop at the Delta Airbnb website to get the extra credit.
Yeah, man. This final thing we've got here is something that I don't know if I've ever seen it before. So Southwest has a sale, and they're allowing people to essentially, they're like giving their people price protection.
Yeah, well, this is they're not really intentionally doing anything as a change here. So it's just a straight up sale from Southwest, but they just happen to be really nice in that you can cancel your award bookings for free, redeposit the points. There's no fee up until the day of departure, up until 10 minutes before departure, you can cancel Southwest. And with paid tickets, you get a credit that does expire after a year. But if you buy a $200 ticket, you can't use it. If you cancel before your flight, you get $200 towards Southwest anytime in the next year. And the only restriction there is it's not transferable. So it's got to be your ticket if it was your ticket originally. But the implication of this sale is that basically ignore all of this. You can tune out right now if you don't have travel coming up sometime between the end of February and June this summer. But if you do have something either booked on Southwest or you're thinking about something that Southwest might cover, they got a fair sale. Domestic travels from the end of February through June 14th. There's a couple international destinations that are from April to the end of May. So if you've either already have a ticket booked during that window or you're looking at it, there's a nice sale. If you already did book, all you have to do is just go in and you can possibly cancel your award booking and rebook it. I saw a few examples where you'd save like 10 or 15,000 potentially Southwest points with this sale. So if you got travel, then we're checking it out.
Yeah, man, that's great stuff.
All right, that's going to wrap it up.
Hey, brothers, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback